new baseboards, and they're level too. So welcome to part 4 of Chadwick, and if you'd watched the last video then you'll know I was in the dilemma of renaming Chadwick from Chadwick TMD to something else, perhaps Chadwick or Chadwick Parkway, due to the railway station that will go on this board just here. Having thought about it, and thanks to you guys leaving comments, it will no longer be Chadwick TMD, it will be Chadwick or Chadwick Model Railway, though it will have Chadwick Parkway will be the name of the out of town railway station, and the TMD will be on the board that's behind the camera. So I'll lose the TMD and we'll take it from there. I also mentioned in the last video about our addiction on buying stuff. Well, you'll be pleased to know I went to the Bristol Model Railway show up at Thornbury last weekend over the bank holiday, and I did refrain from buying lots of gear. However, Squires were there, and I did buy these adjustable feet that will go on the front legs around the layout. And more of that perhaps in a later video when I install those legs. But I did order 10 of these from Squires, and they seem to be a good investment. I ordered those in prior to the show. At the show, 3 guys walked up to me and said, "Aren't you Charlie from YouTube?" And as embarrassed as I was, I said, "Yes, I am." And it was very nice for them to introduce themselves, and we had a nice chat. And I just give a little hello to them. And there was John Cave from Plymouth, Alex Chilton, and also young Chris, known as Great Western 93. It was nice to have a chat with these guys, and thank you very much for introducing yourselves. So besides the show, what I've been up to, well, hopefully you can see behind me there's now a batten that runs around the layout, and there's also a large shelf above it. And running from one end of the layout to the other, you can see there's a batten and the shelf that goes on top. I really needed the shelf on top because the amount of model railway stuff that I've acquired, and I put it onto tables and everything else, and all it ended up doing is getting kind of smashed to bits. So I popped down to a well-known store, that's B&Q, and got myself all this shelving and the brackets to go with it. And at the same time I bought a piece of 8x4 sheet of 12mm ply and this timber that I've used for the batten. Now I don't know if you use B&Q, but if you're of a certain age, which is over 60, then you're entitled to a B&Q discount card, which on a Wednesday gives you 10% off everything in store that isn't already on an offer. So myself and a friend of mine, Simon, jumped into his van, went down to the local B&Q, where I ordered a piece of, well, not ordered, I bought a piece of 12mm ply, and they cut it to size. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, there's no way in the world that I could cut it to such detail, so it was an ideal way of getting it done. At the same time, I bought the battening that you can see around the outside, and also the battening that you'll see later that's on the back of one of the new boards. And I bought the shelves at the same time. The price wise, I think the sheet of 12mm ply was about 28 quid. There was some battening that went with it, which was probably the best part of a tenner. And then these 2 boards, they're both 2.5 meters long, were about 12 quid each. And then I had to buy 10 brackets, and I think the brackets were probably the most expensive item, probably about £3 or £4 per bracket. But without these items, I would never get this done. So it was a case of buying at the ideal time, using the discount card to get a better deal, and by putting the shelf up, I freed up so much more room, so much more space in this room, because now I'm not breaking all these Metcalf kits. You know, I can get them up out of the way safely while I do the rest of the big build. I've also bought in the past a laser leveler. It's from Black & Decker, I'll show you in a moment. And without this laser leveler, I would have not got the battens or the shelves straight, because the room has a kind of a wonky floor, the walls aren't quite straight, and I'm sure the battens have got a little bit of give in them as well. And of course what you can't have is any movement within these items. They've got to be dead level to start with. And this is that laser leveler. I'm sure that lots of manufacturers produce them, and if you turn it on, and then hopefully you can see where it scribes a laser light across the wall, and it's quite simple then to get everything level. As you can see, there's the laser light, and it will go right out across there. So all you do is you put a nail in this thing, and then with a pencil just mark out exactly where you're going to put your batten. It really is quite foolproof, this. So here we are back at board 1, and as I mentioned in last week's video, I've switched that point for the double slip to allow me to run into a siding for a sort of a DMU parcels kind of line. But what I thought I'd show you here is what height I sort of went for. Now I've gone for 36 inches from floor to surface, because when I'm operating this layout I actually believe I'll be sitting down, so therefore I'll be kind of be able to see the trains go by a little bit better, and if I'm working at a desk or model making or whatever whilst that's going on, it'll work better for me. But of course it all depends how high you are, your situation. You might want it lower if you've got children, you might want it higher if you want more of an eye level run. But anyway, I've gone for 36 inches from floor to baseboard is what I've opted for. And then these are the two tracks that come out from the hillside, and as I mentioned in the previous video, I was going to remove a point that was here and put in a double slip. The layout's built with code 100 from Pico. I always use Pico because I don't use Horn, because I'd rather buy something that was made in the UK. And I still believe that Pico have got they've certainly got the edge on track wise. But this is a code 75 double slip because I insist on using electrofrog points and double slips whenever I can. And as Pico don't make a code 100 electrofrog, I'm forced to use a code 75. And then these two tracks here, this one's also in code 75, and this one will be in code 75 as well. But this one here, which is the station down line, which will run through there, is in code 100, and as you can see there's a code 75 to code 100 plastic joiner that goes between there, which allow you to make the two together. I had a couple of comments on the last video about you having a DMU line that would terminate straight into the station without the facility of it going back out and onto the main line. I kind of understand that point, but perhaps I wasn't making myself too clear, because I also wanted it to be used as a parcels area. So if a parcels train came in, it would run into that dead end and do its delivery, and it could come back up through the double slip and then back off onto the main line and away. So it kind of makes sense, but I do appreciate your comments. So moving on from one end of the layout to the other, I've put the other board, known as board 3, in position, and I think you may have seen it before. Well, hopefully you saw it in the last video, and that's kind of straightforward. I've been through the track plan in the past, and it's just a case of the tracks will just stream out of the station down into here, go through a throat network and down into just the two tracks. So you'll have these two going on the upline platform, the main upline, the main downline, and the downline platform, and all those will merge into two lines. They go out back towards the. So that naturally just leaves the centre area where the Chadwick Parkway station will be built. And here is the third board, which will be my board 2, the railway station. And this is the 12mm ply that I mentioned that I bought from B&Q last week, and this is more of the same battening you saw around the outside. The previous boards, the two on the outside, are constructed from the same size battening, but they've used 12mm chipboard. So measuring it all up, it should fit perfectly. Or does it? Clearly it doesn't. I've measured this time and time again to make sure it all fitted in, because I didn't want B&Q to cut this board the wrong size. And to be perfectly honest, it's square and they've cut it exactly as I'd asked. What I didn't realise was that this dimension and that dimension are still different. They might say that it's 18mm by 44mm and the same as this, and two 12mm ply tops, but when I put it together there was some discrepancy. And to that end, what I had to do was just use lollipop sticks along the batten at the back to bring it up a couple of mil to make it all flush, and by putting the lolly sticks in, it fits perfectly. And as I zoom in, hopefully you can see where I've put the lollipop sticks on the back batten to bring it in line with the other boards. So there we have the board in place, and it is level at the back with the other two boards, and obviously it's now a case of manufacturing the legs using the brackets from Squires to make sure that it keeps the same level all the way along these two boards. So hopefully now you'll agree that it's all kind of taking shape, and with these three boards going into position it makes it all kind of straightforward. What I failed to mention was the first thing I did was repainted this back wall and filled in the cracks and kind of rubbed it down to make sure that it was in pristine condition before I started. And the reason for that is, of course, is the one thing I haven't mentioned is using a back seam. And I know there are some back seams that are available that are 15 inches high, so I have 15 inches between the bottom of those brackets and the top of the boards. It actually happens that this runs from countryside into a town. I also know there's a manufacturer that makes something called into the town, though I'm not too sure the town end is dense enough, so I haven't quite decided on which back seam to buy, and I'll be going through the various manufacturers in my spare time over the next week or so, because really the next permanent thing to do is to put that back seam in and make sure it works, offering up these boards to make sure the back seam is at the right height before I wallpaper paste it to the wall. I'm fortunate enough not to have this in an attic environment, so I don't necessarily have to put the back seam onto plywood sheets and then fix it into position. I can just put it straight on the wall, and if I fancied a change I could pull it off and stick another one on. It just makes things so much easier. So that's my next dilemma, is the back seam. Once the back seam's in, I'll have made the boards up with the track and point work, whilst that's happening. And because I've opted to go for modular boards, I can fit the point motors and all that stuff individually, rather than most people that they kind of fit all their layout and get underneath it and spend weeks underneath wiring, whereas actually I just tip them on their sides, do the wiring, put the point motors in and whack them into position. To me it just makes things a little bit easier. And if eventually I move house, then if the room, a new railway room exists in a new house, then I can sever the track, Dremel through it, cut the cables and move the boards relatively easily. But of course, if you've committed to great big long timber runs in your railway room, then you might not have that opportunity. So that's where I am. The stuff I've used today, I think there's only the Black & Decker laser leveler. I'll leave links in the description below. So if you're interested in one of those, click on the link. It'll probably take you to Amazon to where I got mine from. And as I said, it wasn't necessarily a plug for B&Q, but I went around and got the 10% discount card and then bought all my stuff from there on a Wednesday, which is a kind of a win-win. So there we have it. So as usual, hopefully you'll subscribe, and there should be a video here and here if you'd like to watch another one. In the meantime, I'll see you next week. Take care, thanks a lot, and bye-bye.